The hidden forces behind your grocery bill. A deep dive. Hello and welcome. I want to talk about something that's been affecting every single one of us, whether we realize it or not. Something that changed just recently, and it's going to have a direct impact on what you pay at the checkout counter in the coming weeks and months. So here's what happened. The administration just announced a sweeping reversal on food tariffs that covers dozens of everyday items. We're talking about coffee, beef, fresh produce, dairy ingredients, spices, and more. The kind of stuff you probably bought within the last 48 hours. And the reason this happened isn't just economic policy, it's political survival. People have been hurting and the pressure finally became impossible to ignore. But before we dive into all the details, I want to hear from you. What single item at the grocery store made you pause this year? What made you think, wait, when did this get so expensive? Drop it in the comments because I guarantee you're not alone, and these stories matter more than you might think. What actually changed? Let's break down what this policy shift really means. The executive order that just went through removes what's called reciprocal tariffs from a massive list of agricultural products. These weren't small fees. We're talking about tariff rates that ranged anywhere from 10% on the low end to over 50% on certain items. In some extreme cases, when you factor in compounding effects and additional duties, effective rates hit 75% or higher. Think about that for a second. Imagine if every time you bought something you had to pay almost double the actual cost just in fees. That's essentially what was happening to importers, and every single penny of that cost was being passed directly to you. The order is also retroactive, which is unusual. It backdates the relief to the day before it was signed, meaning companies can immediately start adjusting their pricing models based on the new rates. The government wants this to flow through fast, and they're making it as frictionless as possible on the administrative side. Now, you might be wondering, were tariffs really the main driver of these price increases? Wasn't it just inflation? Wasn't it supply chain issues? Wasn't it corporate greed? The answer is complicated, but yes, tariffs played a massive role, and in some categories, they were the primary culprit. The beef crisis. A case study in unintended consequences. Let's start with beef because this is where the policy failure was most dramatic and most visible. Over the last year and a half, the United States imposed extremely high tariffs on beef imports from major suppliers. We're talking about countries like Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Uruguay, and Argentina. These nations account for the overwhelming majority of imported beef in the U.S. market. Brazil alone saw effective tariff rates climb above 75% when you include all the compounding fees and administrative costs. Now here's where it gets interesting. At the exact same time these tariffs were being imposed, the U.S. cattle herd shrank to its smallest size in 75 years. That's not a typo. 75 years. We haven't had this few cattle since the late 1940s. Why? Drought across major ranching states, record-high feed costs driven by global grain shortages, and yes, tariffs on imported feed additives, expensive equipment repairs because steel and aluminum tariffs made tractors and machinery more expensive, and an aging rancher population that wasn't being replaced by younger farmers because the economics just didn't make sense anymore. So you had a perfect storm: domestic supply cratering, foreign supply being choked off by tariffs, and no relief valve anywhere in the system. The result? Retail beef prices jumped between 12% and 18% in a single year, depending on the cut and the region. Ground beef, steaks, roasts, all of it became significantly more expensive. And ranchers, the people who should have benefited from higher prices, actually struggled because input costs rose even faster than the prices they were getting for their cattle. Even more frustrating, ranchers couldn't plan for the future. One month there'd be talk of lifting tariffs. The next month, there'd be rumors of expanding beef quotas with Argentina. Then there'd be threats of even higher tariffs. It was chaotic. And when you're raising cattle, which takes years from birth to market, chaos is a death sentence for your business model. So now, with these tariffs being rolled back, there's hope that imports can stabilize, prices can ease, and ranchers can actually make long-term decisions without constantly looking over their shoulders. Coffee, the morning ritual that became a luxury. Now let's talk about coffee, because if beef didn't hit you personally, coffee probably did. Coffee prices have been climbing for a while, but this year it became extreme. And a lot of people noticed. Your local cafe raised prices. Your grocery store coffee aisle looked different. Even the cheap brands weren't so cheap anymore. Here's what happened behind the scenes. The US imposed a 50% tariff on coffee imports from Brazil. And Brazil isn't just another supplier. Brazil provides roughly 1/3 of all coffee consumed in the United States. It's the single largest source by volume. Vietnam, Colombia, Ethiopia, and other major producers also got hit with significant tariffs, though not quite as severe. But the impact was widespread. By July, global coffee prices hit a record high of $8.41 per pound. That's a 33% increase compared to the previous year. And for roasters, the people who buy green beans and turn them into the coffee you drink, wholesale costs jumped anywhere from 18% to 25%. Now the US doesn't produce meaningful amounts of coffee domestically. A few states, Hawaii, California, Puerto Rico, grow tiny amounts but nowhere near enough to supply the market. So unlike beef, where there's at least a domestic industry, with coffee we're almost entirely dependent on imports. That means roasters and cafes had zero leverage. They had to pay whatever the tariff-inflated price was, or they had to stop selling coffee. And since stopping isn't an option, they passed the cost to you. Some added surcharges, some quietly raised prices across the menu. Some shrunk the bag size and kept the price the same, and customers noticed. People started brewing at home more. They switched to cheaper brands. They skipped their daily coffee run. The tariffs didn't just raise prices, they changed behavior. Now that these tariffs are being rolled back, there's hope that prices can stabilize and maybe even drop. But here's the catch. Coffee that was already shipped under the old tariff rate is still in the pipeline. It was already priced, already sold to roasters, already on its way to stores. So the relief won't be instant. It'll take weeks, maybe a couple of months before you see meaningful price drops. But it's coming, and that matters. The tomato situation. When trade agreements expire, tomatoes became their own unique crisis, and it happened fast. When a long-standing trade agreement with Mexico expired, the US imposed a 17% tariff on Mexican tomatoes almost overnight. And Mexico is one of the largest tomato suppliers to the US, especially for fresh tomatoes in the winter months when domestic production is low. Within days, you saw the impact. Fresh tomatoes got more expensive. Canned tomatoes, tomato paste, salsa, pasta sauces, anything with tomatoes in it saw price increases. Restaurants started charging extra for dishes that relied heavily on tomatoes. Salad bars cut back on portions. And it wasn't just restaurants and home cooks who felt it. Food manufacturers, the companies that make jarred sauces and canned soups and frozen pizzas, they all had to adjust their formulas or raise their prices. The tariff rollback includes tomatoes, which means this pressure should start to ease. But again, it's not instant. Supply chains are long and complicated. The tomatoes in your store today were probably picked weeks ago, possibly before the tariff relief was even announced. The bigger picture. 74% of food imports were affected. Here's a statistic that puts everything into perspective. Back in August, the Tax Foundation estimated that 74% of U.S. food imports were facing tariffs. 3/4, nearly every imported food item you can think of. Bananas, oranges, avocados, pineapples, coconuts, spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, turmeric. Cocoa for chocolate, tea, olive oil, frozen vegetables, dairy ingredients. It wasn't just one or two categories, it was systematic. And when you walked into a grocery store, you felt it everywhere. People started substituting. They bought fewer fresh fruits, they skipped the spices, they bought domestic products when they could, even if they were lower quality or more expensive. But there's only so much substituting you can do before your diet starts to suffer. And for people on fixed incomes, seniors, families using SNAP benefits, people working minimum wage, this wasn't just inconvenient. It was devastating. It meant choosing between fresh produce and rent, between coffee and medication, between feeding your kids properly and keeping the lights on. So when voters went to the polls earlier this month, they sent a clear message. Affordability matters. Grocery costs matter, and if you want to stay in office, you need to fix this. The administration heard that message. And this tariff rollback is the direct result. What happens next? So what does this actually mean for you, practically speaking? First, understand that price relief will be gradual. Fast-moving goods, things like bananas that go from farm to store in days, you might see changes within a week or two. Coffee and beef, which have longer supply chains, might take a month or more. Second, not every store will pass savings along at the same rate. Some retailers will drop prices immediately to stay competitive. Others will hold on to their margins for a while, waiting to see what competitors do. So it pays to shop around and pay attention. Third, this isn't just about tariffs. There are still other inflationary pressures in the system. Labor costs, transportation costs, energy costs. Those haven't changed. So even with tariff relief, you're probably not going back to 2019 prices. But you should see some improvement. Fourth, watch for sales and promotions. Stores know people are price sensitive right now, and they'll use tariff relief as a marketing opportunity. Lower coffee prices, beef on sale, that kind of thing. Take advantage of it, the broader policy shift. There's something else happening here that's worth noting. This isn't just a one-time emergency fix. There are signs that the administration is rethinking its entire approach to trade policy. Just recently, they announced a new trade framework with Switzerland that drops tariffs from 39% down to 15%. That's a huge reduction, and it signals a willingness to negotiate and compromise in ways we haven't seen before. There are also ongoing talks with other major trading partners about reducing tariffs on industrial goods, agricultural products, and services. The rhetoric is shifting from tariffs protect American jobs to tariffs need to be strategic and targeted. This is a significant change, and if it continues, it could mean more relief across the board, not just on food, but on other consumer goods as well. Why this matters to you? Let me bring this back to the personal level for a moment. You're not imagining things. Groceries have been painfully expensive, and it's not your fault. You're not bad at budgeting. You're not buying the wrong things. The prices really did go up, and they went up fast. This tariff rollback is an acknowledgement of that reality. It's the government saying, yes, we see the problem and we're taking action. Is it perfect? No. Is it late? Absolutely. Could they have done this sooner? Without question. But it's still something, and for people who are struggling, who are skipping meals or watering down their coffee or buying the cheapest possible ingredients just to get by, even small relief matters, so keep an eye on your regular purchases over the next few weeks. Notice what changes. If you see prices drop even a little, that's the policy working. If you don't, maybe switch stores or let the manager know you're paying attention. And most importantly, take care of yourself. Budget fatigue is real. Inflation exhaustion is real. Constantly worrying about money is draining. So if this policy brings even a little relief, allow yourself to feel that. You've earned it. Your voice matters. Before we wrap up, I want to emphasize something important. This policy change happened because people spoke up. They voted based on affordability, they complained to their representatives, they shared their struggles on social media and in community meetings. They made it impossible to ignore. That's not nothing. That's democracy working slowly and imperfectly, but working. So keep speaking up. Keep sharing your story. Keep letting people know what's really happening in your life. Because that's how change happens. That's how policy shifts from theory to reality. And if you found this helpful, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's been struggling with grocery costs and doesn't understand why. Someone who thinks they're alone in this. They're not. None of us are. Thanks for being here. Take care, and I'll see you soon.